Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent experiences in business.
Learn what their cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again. Welcome, listeners. It's Ben-Jamin Toy with Dr. Troy. And today we are greeted with Ben Marley, a good friend of mine for over 15-ish or over
17
years. 17
years. And I'm privileged because it's Ben to the power of two.
Yep. And just, listeners, this might be us interviewing Troy at some point, because we actually used to have an internet radio show almost over a decade ago, when internet radio, or it would have been called a podcast back then, but it was way more complicated. It was plugging into a soundboard and, oh my gosh. So anyways, welcome, Ben, to the Conversations with Cohesive Leaders. And we start every show with a connections before content question. So we have a question that we're gonna hit you first with before we get into any content of the show.
And that question is, of all the places you've traveled, what place did you like the best?
I love this question so much. It's a hard one to answer, but the thing that comes to mind immediately is South Africa. And we spent like 2.5 weeks there visiting friends. It was on my bucket list just because of all the different things that we could do. So my wife Shonda and I, and at this time our 1-year-old daughter Elliot, were living in Taiwan, and we were moving back from Taiwan to the US. And while we were living in Taiwan for a few years, our best friends over there were this couple from South Africa who were also teaching English there. And they moved home to South Africa a year before we moved back. So sort of on our way back from Taiwan to the US, we stopped in South Africa to visit them. And we had like a week staying with them and in like the Pretoria, Johannesburg area. And then we went down to Cape Town and for a few days, and then drove the garden route, the southern part of South Africa. And it was phenomenal. I mean, this trip had like everything you could possibly want. Cape Town's beautiful, going up on top of like Lion's Head Mountain and Table Mountain. And it's just incredible scenery, right? And then also going over to like Stellenbosch and taking wine tours. Like that was phenomenal. Wine is apparently overproduced in South Africa, which really drives the price down, which is pretty amazing. So for like $20, like you go all day long and they take you to like 4 or 5 different wineries, vineyards, and they're bringing you all these samples and stuff, and chocolate pairings and cheese pairings. And they have child minders. So the fact that we had our 1-year-old with us was okay, because like, hey, somebody else was watching her on a playground while we were like sampling wine as responsible parents, right?
Wow.
So, and then I'm not even to like my favorite part of the trip yet, but another part. So if you don't know, there are penguins in South Africa, right? So we literally get to see our 1-year-old toddling down the beach, like chasing penguins down the beach, like through these boulders. And it's just magical and amazing. And let's see what else. You get to see where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans come together at the southernmost point of the country, right? In the southernmost point of the African continent. So that's cool. But what I really loved, and the reason that I really wanted to go there, and wildlife, we actually didn't do safari. That's one thing that I would probably do differently. We did see some big game parks, like, and saw zebras just kind of running around, and like lions and rhinos and stuff. That's awesome. But the 2 things that I was most excited about were cage diving with great white sharks and bungee jumping off of the tallest bungee bridge in the world, which is in the Blokran's Gorge. So I got to do those 2 things that were both on my bucket list, just a handful of days apart, like probably 2 or 3 days apart. And it was just like a phenomenal experience. Like they both definitely lived up to the hype. It was amazing. 100% recommend it.
And you were so close to only doing one of them if one didn't pan out.
I know, right? I know.
Yeah. I love this because we could just talk forever.
Oh my gosh.
I am such a travel enthusiast with the places that I've been blessed and fortunate enough to go to.
Well, I had the fortune to have, when I was 18, an uncle say, travel the world when you're young and travel the US when you're older. His perspective was the US is built for the elderly and handicapped. The rest of the world is not. So he put that travel bug in me when most of my family never got to do much of that. So I've been blessed in that area. So I'll jump in and share mine. Like there's been so many great places, but the trip and the vacation, or maybe not a vacation, but I was freshman year of college, went back to go see my German friends that I did an exchange program with. And we spent us 12 days in Germany and then France. And so we went to the French Alps and lived planes, trains, and automobiles. And it was one of these scenarios where I was doing something incredibly fun. We had 6 feet of fresh powder the second day I was there, but I was 19 on my own in this foreign country with only other kids that were mainly younger than me. But to realize how much different Europeans lived with autonomy and compared to like all the restrictions that I felt like I had growing up, and these kids were used to doing this type of trip all the time. Like 14-year-olds, they were going on trips a week on their own without parental supervision. So that trip, great snowboarding on a glacier. We had one trip that 45 minutes of different gondola rides and stuff was one run the entire day home. So incredible experience. I would love to go back there and just snowboard in the Alps again.
Yeah. So we have been traveling for well over 30 some years, and I've had the privilege of visiting over 60 countries. I've been on 6 continents. In 2026, I will then accomplish my 7th continent, unless the good Lord has a different mindset for that. But one of the places that I've defined, like in the beginning, because I know people would always ask and go like, well, you've traveled, like what's your favorite place? And it's like, oh my gosh, I've been to so many places. That's beautiful things that I've seen, that I've done, that were just like wonderful. For me, a bucket list item was going to Rio and seeing Christ the Redeemer, and being actually present to all of that experience, so which was really pretty awesome. But the story that we tell is the little town in Bavarian Germany called Garmisch-Partenkirchen, and that is the place that we found to be our favorite. And it was when we first started, we said we're going to stick to it's kind of like having a favorite song or having a favorite meal or something, and just the experience. So for me, traveling is always about the experience. It's not really the history. I pay attention to the history, but it's the experience. How do I feel in that space in the moment that I'm there? And what am I experiencing? And how am I understanding the culture and the language and all those nuances that come along with it? So being in that Bavarian area of Germany, my wife has ancestry going back into Germany. So this was an important trip for us for that reason. But in that town, they had the people dressed in lederhosen, and they were doing the slap dancing, and they had the accordion playing. And when we went in to eat, we sat at a community table where it's a big, long table with benches, and table for 2 meant you sit side by side or you sat across from each other. Like you didn't sit in a separate table. You were right there, and you're sharing community food, and you had the beer steins, and you can just imagine them being raised and clanking together, and people just enjoying themselves and having a great time. And when we managed to wake up the next morning, when we opened the wooden shutters, because there were no screens on these windows because they don't deal with the pest like we do here in the States, and we opened them up, and there was our flower box that was right there on the window ledge with these beautiful flowers. And literally, it had to have been no more than a football field away were the Alps, and it just was magical.
So
That's awesome. I love that.
This ties in so much. So Ben and I's old radio show podcast was Love Bent and Adventure Bound. So we talked, and we had guests from all over the world chiming in, talking about their experiences while dating or vacations and all that, but all those types of things. And so anyways, this is some really cool nostalgia right here.
And it relates
Yep.
very much to what we're trying to do through this podcast. I mean, we're going to get to the uh-oh moment here in just a second, but podcast is designed for those individuals who might be dissatisfied with where they currently are in their place in life. And what we wanted to do was to provide them with an experience through not only this podcast, but through the book, Becoming a Cohesive Leader, the Power Guide to Grow, Develop, and Advance Your Career, the curriculum, the community that they can be a part of, the membership they can be a part of, because we know that individuals need help getting unstuck. And so this is just been like a great opportunity. And your experiences that you have is what sometimes shapes you to getting the career you want, not the job you have.
And to aid in the connection stuff, we want Ben for you to share. Now, tell the listeners who you are. But first, I want you to say who you I being your identity, behavior, traits, character, all the things about you that are not really, while some of those may have roles, they're not role as far as business goes. That's who you are, big R role. So we want to know who you are as a person and then the hats you have worn.
Yeah, so first and foremost, like I am a child of the Most High God, right? Um, love Jesus, and literally like my one goal in life is to try to filter decisions through him, right? Because like firm, like core foundational belief is that there is a God of the universe, that he is good, that he loves me, that his plans for me are better than anything that I could even hope and or imagine for myself, right? So if that's the case, I'd be a fool to go try to figure out things on my own or try to do things on my own rather than trying to discern, hey, God, what are these plans that you have for me? What is your will for me? And then try to, okay, how do I now live that out? Right. So like that's who I probably primarily, right? Um, and it's a wild ride. It's incredible. But also, okay, so what does that look like? Practically speaking, like what do I do? Well, I don't do it perfectly, obviously, but I try really, really hard to love God and then love other people through that filter, right? Um, and then that filters down into like everything. So that filters down into how I try to love my wife, how I try to parent my kids, how I try to be a friend, right? And then how I also try to do work. Um, and I don't know if you want to talk about role at work yet, but I can give you my mission statement. My mission is to glorify God in guiding people to work that brings them joy and purpose. Because I also believe, like very firmly, that God created each of us for a purpose, right? Like we're not here accidentally. And he's equipped us with gifts and talents and abilities to accomplish that purpose, right? And not everybody is going to get like their life's mission in line with the work that they do, their vocation. But we spend so many of our waking hours at work. When we can get those things in line, everything is better. We thrive, right? Like when my work is in alignment with the way God's created me, I'm way more engaged. I'm way more energized. I'm way more productive. I'm more fruitful. And I feel better. And then I take that energy and I'm a better husband because of it. I'm a better dad because of it. I'm a better friend because I know for sure the opposite is true. Like when I'm in roles that are out of alignment, that are burning me out, that are draining me, I come and I've got less patience with my wife. I've got less patience with my kids. And I don't even try to go hang out with my friends because I just don't have the energy for it. So if we can be intentional, I love what you guys are doing. If we can be intentional about getting that work in alignment with the way that we've been created, man, life can be fun.
Yeah, it's really important because what you're talking about are core values. This is your core value, and to really understand the way we act is these values that we come in contact with. We create these values over a period of time. It's sometimes referred to as the attribution theory, and we come up with like our life experiences, and then that creates a value, or we adopt a value based on something that we've read or we've heard or that, and those values then give way to our beliefs. And so you spoke a lot about your beliefs that were really attached to the values that you had when you first started the podcast with your very first explanation of who you were. And then moving forward from your beliefs then become your attitudes, and not just your positive or negative attitudes, but it's really the attitudes of your cultural similarities and differences that you are filtering everything through. And when you take core values, beliefs, and attitudes, all of them manifest into behaviors. So how people behave has so much to do with those core values. And when I'm working with leaders and they ask me, they go, how do I change this person, because they know that they could do so much more? we have to address the core values, because we can't change the bad attitude by simply talking it to death. We have to understand the value that is sourcing that particular behavior and see if we can then make some change or some conversation around that.
Awesome. Yeah. I when you live it though, the alignment, I've experienced that firsthand and done the things that don't align. And when you do the work that you do, the joy just comes from it.
Yeah, it does.
All right.
I love, Dr. Troy, what you said about sometimes it's something you read or you hear. I remember hearing Andy Stanley say, your fully maximized strengths are going to be significantly more impactful than your marginally improved weaknesses for your organization or whatever you're doing, right? And I feel like I found a lot of freedom in that, because previously I've definitely compared myself with other people and felt bad about, hey, why am I not better at sales, for example, right? Like, why can't I do XYZ role, right? And a lot of it does come down to sales, but just really thinking like I need to strive for improving that. And it's like, that's not how I was wired. And how I was wired wasn't an accident. So that freed me up to say, instead of trying to go do this thing that's painful and not enjoyable and that I'm not great at, I can literally focus on the things that I'm good at, that I enjoy. And like problem solving, I love problem solving, or coming up with novel solutions to things, right? And like literally I'm wired that way, and I can just go do that one thing and be way more impactful than, oh, I need to wear all these hats and do all these other things, and then maybe, like jack of all trade, master of none, make a tiny little impact instead. It's super freeing. I love it.
Yes, because what you really are focusing on are your strengths and not your weaknesses. And oftentimes we spend too much time trying to fix weaknesses instead of expanding upon our strengths. And I like to say that for every strength, there is a weakness. For every weakness, there is a strength. So if you have a weakness that you feel that you want to address, so that people don't get disheartened in the fact that they go like, well, gee, I'll just never improve. But to be able to say, but improve upon the strength that is associated with that weakness, and that'll move it forward. There's a conversation that, all ships rise, as things get better, all ships rise. So I kind of equated it to this little theory about sinking, swimming, or treading water. And what I believe is when you focus on your strengths differently than your weaknesses is the difference between swimming and treading water. So have you treaded water before, Ben?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and when you do that, what's happening to your arms and your legs?
Yeah, they're moving a lot.
Moving a lot. And where's your head?
It's above water.
It's above water, and you're kind of maybe looking there, or might even be looking up, whatever. Okay. When you're swimming, what's happening with your arms and your legs?
Oh yeah, they're still moving a lot, but differently.
Differently. And where's your head placed?
A lot of the time it's face down in the water.
That's right. So therefore it is moving towards something as opposed to just staying present in space. So my theory is that you can expend a lot of energy to stay in the same space, which would be working on weaknesses that might get a little bit better. But wow, can you imagine the impact if you started swimming and you really put your head down and put your arms and your legs to the actions of moving yourself forward? What a difference that could make for you in your life. And this is what we're trying to impart upon individuals, is to, get into the swimming mode. Whether you like water or not, the concept is still there. You understand the concept. And so focus on your strengths and kind of allow them to help you move forward.
I want to say that this may be actually a new concept for many of our listeners, especially if you're listening under 30 years old. The current, without going too much in the rabbit hole, you may have always been taught to be a well-rounded person, to have a little bit of knowledge of this, or it's okay. You want to be proficient in things, but the leadership conversation actually is different. It is focusing on the strengths, improving that. John Maxwell says the best with I think he says 1,000 hours of effort in a year, you're barely going to get no more than 2 on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, so if you start off at something at a 4, the best you're going to get is 6 at something by the end of the year. And that's with intentional focus. So why not take that 6 of something and get it to an 8? And that's a conversation that's not being had by many folks. They're wanting to be everything, and they're scared to niche. They're scared, or never been told to lean in to those God-given traits and desires, because certain things actually give you joy and energy from doing.
Yeah. So speaking on the unjoy for a moment, Ben, we're going to transition to the nature of our podcast. So this is the Uh-Oh podcast. Now, we've had people share some things that we might have thought that we could call this the Whoop Whoop podcast. We had someone talk about food, and we could talk about the Yum Yum podcast, but this is the Uh-Oh podcast. So what we're doing is trying to help people learn from other people's Uh-Oh experiences. So I know you had a little while to think about that before coming onto the podcast. So please share with Ben and I, what is your uh-oh experience for today?
Man, so I've had so many to choose from. So blessed with so many uh-oh experiences. It was hard to decide. As I was thinking about them, though, I realized they seem to kind of stem from the same place, and that's operating on limiting beliefs rooted in false assumptions. And what I mean by that is having an idea that, okay, the world works in this way and I need to respond or operate based on that. And that is wrong, right? So going back to even college, like I knew when I was going into college, oh, I want to work for myself one day. I want to be an entrepreneur. And I rationalized, okay, it probably doesn't really matter what I major in because how could a professor that's an employee teach me about how to run my own business? And I can tell you from firsthand experience, that was a false belief, right? That was bad information that I was operating on because when I studied abroad in Australia, one of my professors was the owner of their equivalent of like Hallmark greeting cards, right? And this dude was incredible. And but like, okay, I didn't realize as a high schooler who's just rationalizing things, or even in college, that, oh, people who are successful in business, like it's not just like, oh, I went and got a job as a professor and I'm teaching only from theory. It's, oh, I went and had a successful business and now I'm like pouring into the next generation with that knowledge. Or I'm an adjunct and I'm teaching while I'm running my successful business, right? Because I want to give back. So like that led me to maybe not maximize that college experience, right? Because I didn't pursue business because I was like, oh, whatever, bad beliefs. Then later, what that evolved into was I had been told, "Oh, you should never partner with somebody. You never want to have a partner in business. You want to be able to have control and own everything yourself, so that it's always like yours. You can make all the decisions, whatever." And so, okay, that's how it's supposed to be. Like, and this is my mom telling me this, who is not some like successful business person necessarily. Like, and she eventually later owned a franchise, right? But actually, she was operating from like an employee background, which is fine, but it's not the most credible source of like what I should be basing business decisions on, right? So as I'm younger, so I'm thinking, and I'm about to get to a specific story here, but thinking like, okay, I need to own a business myself. I need to run everything. I basically have to be that jack of all trades. I've got to do everything myself because starting off, I don't have money really to hire other people. So the really comes down to I started this company called Prep Monsters. And I had a background tutoring SAT and ACT test prep. And I thought, if I could gamify test prep, I could get this, I could get a lot more students preparing for the test. And the reason that I cared about that is because I saw an opportunity to really radically impact the trajectory of someone's life in a very short period of time, like literally 6 to 8 weeks. And they could go from, hey, I previously wouldn't have qualified based on my test scores to get admitted to college, to now I'm getting in and getting into a good school. Or previously I wasn't, I was getting in, but I was, coming out of pocket with student loans. And now I've got scholarships that I'm going to be able to afford this and maybe even graduate debt free, right? It was a very high impact in a very short period of time. And I thought, oh, maybe if test prep was more engaging and more affordable, then maybe more students would do it, right? But what I did was I took a huge chunk of my wife's retirement savings and invested into building this platform. I went and I reached out to all 220 odd high schools here in South Carolina, to their leaders, set up meetings with maybe 20 of them, and identified my top 10 that I wanted to do a pilot program with. So this is the beginning of the year in 2019. I got them to sign letters of intent saying, hey, we would love to bring this program onto our school because I'm going to do a free pilot program so I can get data to demonstrate that it's going to be a quality program, right? I partner up with a white label test prep curriculum company. I partner up with the gamified learning management system that the World Health Organization uses to train people, that Samsung, L'Oreal, companies like that, right? So I've got these vendors and I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got great quality stuff that I'm putting together here. And then I get these signed letters of intent. And okay, once I get that in the, January, February timeframe of 2019, I then go commit a huge chunk of my wife's retirement and go invest in building this thing. And I spent like the next several months just putting it all together, right? I get it ready to go. I come back in August and hey, okay, administrators at these 10 schools that have said, hey, we want to pilot this program. And by the way, the big ask for them was they had to commit class time to it. So their students would actually be able to do it, because I didn't want kids to, to leave it up to them to go home, after it. Maybe they do it, maybe they don't. But I thought, hey, if they have a class dedicated to it, at least like a couple days a week, they're going to be putting the hours in and we're going to see results. And I needed them to take a test at first, do the program for the semester, and then take a test at the end so I could actually measure the score increase, right? So this all sounds great to me. Here's the challenge. I get back in August, and of those 10 schools, half of them had new administrators. And they were like, who are you? No, we're not doing that. Like, I'm trying to get my head above water here in this new institution, right? Like, I'm not implementing some external program. And then of the 5 remaining, I wound up, they kept saying, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to do it, and never executing. And finally, one school actually implemented the program for most of the semester. And then suddenly, like, I kind of just stopped hearing back from them. Right. And so we get through the semester, and let's see, I think my funding for the pilot program from this gamified LMS was set to run out in February of 2020. And so here I am, February of 2020. I've had one school sort of go through the program and use it, but I didn't get a test at the end of it. So I had no data to demonstrate how effective it was. And it wouldn't be statistically significant with like 20 kids in one school anyway, right? But like the funding's running out and I'm going to have to start paying monthly, like at least a couple $1,000s. This is like $1,000 or $2,000 a month just to keep the platform online, right? And I'm sitting here and I'm just faced with like, I've committed all this time, all this effort, all this money into building this thing. And now I'm faced with the potential of throwing good money after bad to keep it afloat, right? Where I have no revenue, no data, like nothing, and no clear picture of how I'm going to move into that. So I pray and I'm just like, God, what am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to keep pouring money into this, or am I supposed to let it go? Right. And this was really hard, especially for my wife, to see like, you're considering letting this go because like that's her retirement that we put into it, right? Like she's vested. But I felt like it was the right thing to do. So I let it go. And then March of 2020, COVID hits and schools shut down and no one's taken the ACT and SAT for at least the next 6 months because nobody's prepping for it because they want to wait until closer to the test to study, right? And then, oh, by the way, colleges start to go test optional as well. So kids are like, do I even need to take the test anymore? So this whole thing that I've just built, it's like, is that even relevant anymore, right? But I just feel like the providence of God definitely protected me from throwing additional money at that, right? But when I think about the maybe if I hadn't tried to do everything myself, if I had found partners that were really skilled at the sales, like maybe we could have gotten more schools on board and maybe they would have executed. Like I know from Working Genius, galvanizing, getting people to rally around and champion an idea, getting people excited about, running forward with an idea. That's one of my working frustrations, which means I'm not good at it and it drains my energy. That's what I was doing and trying to get all those schools on board, right? But if I had had a partner or somebody working on my team that was great at that, maybe I would have had good data, right? Stepping back, like the other thing that's a challenge for me is not innovation. Innovation is actually the thing that I'm good at. Discernment is the thing that's a challenge. So like I can see, hey, I'll create this solution, but like discernment's kind of a critical next step to say like, is that the right solution to be creating? Is that worthwhile or not? Right? Like that would have been really, really good other than just like, oh, well, everybody I share this idea with is like, that's amazing. You should definitely do this. So yeah, the uh-oh really comes down to trying to do everything myself instead of just maximizing my strengths and then also drawing on the strengths of other people.
I really love how you have, oh my gosh, you have packed so much into this that although you talked about it from a business perspective, I can see how it relates to an individual person within an organization. One of the things I wanted to fall back on, just for some clarification, was you talked about listening to mom, and so I want to make sure for all the moms out there, people love their mom, like we're loving on mom, so we can listen to mom. But I thought what you said was a piece of discernment, is that mom was speaking from an employee mindset when she gave you advice to not have partners or to have people, which is contrary to the way it works in business, is you actually come together. So Ben-Jamin and I, have come together to form something where I have brought an academic and a formal sort of experience with work and how that goes. And Ben is a lot more hands-on, experiential, team building, team bonding, and mirroring those two together have really exploded not only the Cohesion Culture program, but also the Cohesive Leader program that we offer to individuals. So it is important to listen to individuals and to make sure that you're validating what they're saying based on understanding their biases. And it's something that we talk about in research, from my PhD background, is called reflexivity. And that is understanding your biases and exposing them, but not making decisions strictly on the biases. The biases are going to be present. And so you acknowledge the bias. And once you acknowledge the bias, and the whole idea for that is so that the reader of your research will understand if you've got some contrary thinking to theirs, you can put it out there in the forefront so people can assess it and evaluate it. So for individuals who are looking to grow, develop, and advance their career, that's what they have to do. They have to select and listen to people who are going to help support where they're going. So they have to understand their mindset and the perspective by which they're speaking. And although your mom's bias was always to be good for you and to do things that were right, she may not have been the person to listen to.
Well, to quote my good friend Charlinda Scales, trust but verify. However, I want to jump in and say that our partnership now is a result, though, of my change in beliefs as well. I grew up with the no partner, no, you shouldn't have a partner, because the examples that I had were family members going bad, relatives, friends where they weren't documented. So the idea of partnership, I think there's an underlying tone of why, until you have a good example of what a partnership can be. And I met a local business guy that says, well, it all comes down to the operating agreement. So when you partner with people in co-working space, when you have a collaboration, requires agreement and trust. Agreement that you're needed, trust that you're going to get the job done. But prior to that, it was well, they can screw you in this area, or this may not happen. But once you actually get that covered, and when you have a sane brain making the decisions with an operating agreement, partnerships are better. Okay, how are we going to handle problems when they arise? Because they will arise. Like, to think that they're not going to be one is just naivete, right? And I think that's when family members get into those relationships, like, how I can't even possibly imagine not this being, rainbows and butterflies and all this kind of stuff. But that just shows your naivete and ignorance towards life and business.
And thinking about this as it relates to you working inside of an organization and wanting to advance and to move forward, think about the things, Ben, just the stuff that you just, described, that whole experience. You have to think about, how do I apply it? I may not be an individual inside a company who wants to do a partnership or wants to do a business. So they may think, oh, this experience isn't really much for me. But it really is when you think about the underlying issues, the underlying thinking that went into where that experience is, and how you can safeguard against that inside your business by who you listen to, the behaviors that you exhibit through your core values, your beliefs, and your attitudes. And all of that manifests itself into your opportunity to be successful, to think about strengths versus weaknesses and where you spend that energy. Really appreciate
Well,
that.
even when you're working on a project and you give credit to them, people will see that type of thing. When you work together, that's a partnership. And when you're getting that out, people think that it's a fight. Well, we're going after the same promotion. The folks that are looking see all of those elements together. So
That's a great point to talk about. Like there is a partnership even inside an organization. It's just not formalized with an operating agreement, so to speak.
you think you might get stabbed in the back, but the other people are looking. They've got their own leadership cameras everywhere.
Yeah, so it's really good.
So anyways, that is the word. Thank you for sharing. What were the immediate steps though that you took though to avoid or to correct that one? What, by not partnering, what was the immediate scenarios?
Can we?
Sorry.
Okay, so just a little moment here. So can we ask what it cost him?
Sure.
Okay, let's ask what it cost him first.
Yes.
Okay, so we know that it could cost you money, experience, relationships, and so forth. But kind of just however you want to quantify it, what did this experience cost you?
So money wise, it cost half of my wife's retirement. And again, like, so to give a little bit of context, she had worked as a teacher in the state of South Carolina for 6 years, right? And contributed to her retirement for those 6 years, right? But still, like half of everything that she had saved, like was gone. And I mean, at this point, she was a full-time mom, and it had been a few years after that. So probably like this fund had been together for like 10 or 12 years or something. So half of that, it caused strain in my marriage because not only was I not having income, which is stressful, but literally just like half the retirement that my wife worked for, right? Like that was gone, right? It cost me an entire year plus because I put that whole program together and more than that, right? And then to see it just like completely fall apart. What else? There was a lot of cost there. Yeah, there was a lot of cost there for sure.
Hey, Ben, now we're going to tee it up.
All right. Were there any things that you did to solve that immediately, or was it just a solve and move on, cut and move on?
Yeah, no, I mean, part of solving it really was that decision to shut it down, right? Like it was a necessary ending. I'm actually listening to a book right now, Necessary Endings, because had I not done that, I would have wasted more money, right? More money, more time, and I couldn't have pivoted into something that was going to be relevant. So, especially with like COVID happening and the testing not being relevant anymore, I mean, if I had really not been able to let go of that, and I had said, no, I know, okay, this is going to come back. Testing's always going to be there, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but let's just keep doing this. Well, I mean, it was at least 6 months or so before testing came back at all. So say like I had to throw in another 12 grand at that point, probably would have been to keep with no income, right? So that was significant. That would have been significant. And however much more time, I mean, what am I going to do? Scrape together another pilot when kids are doing like virtual school and COVID? Like it never would have worked. It just like the timing wasn't going to be there. So recognizing it and ending it, that was the thing that I did. And then pivoting to, okay, what's my market asking me for? Well, working with families doing the test prep, and having a bit of a writing background and coaching essay writing and stuff like that, and having good success and getting admitted to a number of schools and getting scholarships, families began to ask me for help with the admissions process and with writing essays and these things. And so I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to give students what I wish I would have had, and that's figuring out the target career. And then reverse engineering the best pathway to get there. So I found great assessments. I'm a huge believer in assessments, right? I'm figuring out those strengths, those aptitudes and abilities that I was talking about earlier. Found one of those and was able to help students figure out their target careers, and then use data that an economist had put together that actually demonstrated ROI on 35,000 different college programs across the US. So I could actually show comparing average cost of attendance versus average salary expectation from like real data from alumni from these programs. Hey, this is where your biggest ROI is going to be if this is your career. And so I put together a program doing that. And then I would help students go through the application process basically to their top schools that were the best fit.
Okay. I have this brings up an incredible dichotomy, and maybe individually we give the answers. Where is the where do you find the line between the grit mindset and tenacity. Seeing, life is hard. You have to work towards something and go through some hard challenges, and knowing when to pivot or give it up. Like, how do you make those decisions of seeing it through, right? Because, is it a generational things where you just stick with it, or is it some folks, every hard thing, they go to the next thing. So how do you make your decisions of seeing it through versus the pivot?
Yeah. So I read a book called Sacred Pace, and that's not how I've always made decisions, but it's what I think is probably the most helpful framework now for me. Sacred Pace was written by this guy that started an energy company, oil and gas or something, I don't know. And he's very, very successful, multimillionaire. And he started it with the commitment to not work more than 40 hours a week. And so if he knew that he was going to run this type of business and not work more than 40 hours a week, he was going to really need to lean on God in all his decision making, right? So he came up with this 4-step process, and it's not to just make decisions, but it's basically a 4-step process for getting yourself in the best position to discern God's will in a circumstance, right? And those 4 steps are: number 1, consult your friend Jesus, so pray about it. Number 2, gather facts, because we got to see what's, like what's what. Number 3, watch for circumstances. And then number 4, and this is the hardest one to do, and that's get neutral. And what that means is beyond the yes or no, because so often it's very easy to say, hey, I see this, I want to do it, I'm praying for permission, or I don't want to do it, I'm praying like, don't make me do that. Get beyond that to, hey, God, I don't care if it's yes or no. I know that you are good. You love me. Your plans are better than my plans for me. So I don't care if it's yes or no. I just want to know what's your will. And when we get to that point that we're neutral and we don't care if it's yes or no, then we're primed to hear what his will is, discern what his will is, and then go forward making that decision.
Awesome.
It's really great.
Bringing up Andy Stanley again, one of my filters in that scenario is the best question ever. It's a very long book. For basically one question you got to ask yourself is this choice wise? Because somehow internally we filter our decision making very differently. But is it profitable? Is it fun? Is it the best? But if you say wise, it changes our thought process inside. So that has helped me. And actually, I think to some degree that filters in a couple of those elements there. And for me, it's I have a lot of ideas and I'll think them through. But like when I feel at peace with the decision, I know that he's the author of peace. So that means I can move forward. So, and I've had to actually literally internally use is it a wise choice? Because I can have plenty of ones that, is it fun? Is it going to be profitable? Is it industry motivating or something, but sometimes the answer comes back and no, it's not wise based on X, Y, and Z. So
yeah, good stuff. So Ben, it was great having you on the podcast today. We really appreciate it. How can folks who are listening get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Ben Marley. And there's probably a bunch of us out there. I've met some other ones. So Ben Marley and Pivotal Hires is the company. So if you see Ben Marley with Pivotal Hires, that's me.
That's good. And
awesome.
we typically like to close out our session with a question.
I have another one.
Ben's got a little question for you. But for the folks who want to get in touch with Ben and I, you can reach us at info@cohesionculture.net.
And this one ties into our initial connection question. Would you rather travel to somewhere new every single day for a year or never leave home for a year?
Oh, man, I would travel to somewhere new every day. That sounds like tiring, but it doesn't have to be extreme. Like I went to Thailand today and I went to Australia tomorrow. It could be like I went to this new spot in the city today. I went to whatever.
Making it local.
I do. I love that because based on the beginning, that's exactly what I would have picked as well too. Is that even though I like going on places where we sometimes choose a hub and we stay there and then we just do little day trips here and there.
Yep.
But I do think that having a different experience every day would be really awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I probably have 2 answers. It depends on context, right? Like if it's just me, I'm traveling. If it's me and my 3 kids who are 4, 6, and 8, man, travel is awesome and it can be amazing with kids, but done wrong, it is exhausting. So if it was us, it might be like, don't leave home for a year.
Yeah.
Which other, the 1 year older makes a difference, right?
What about you,
Yeah.
Ben?
You know, given that scenario, I would say the same thing. I would travel, but I love the idea of, and I've helped people understand that you can live life in a different location. I had a friend that always wanted to be on the go when he traveled somewhere, and say he traveled to this country because he spent several hours and he checked it off. I'm like, that's not what I want to see. I want to be in that city, and I want to become a local at that cafe because I went there 3 mornings in a row, and by morning 4, they actually have my order already ready or something like that. So and we can do that at home. So I like the idea of, okay, today I'm going to try this out, or I'm going to get this perspective, or I'm going to take this drive home. So that reframed my answer, because I only thought of it as big travel, but it could be much closer to home.
Closer to home. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ben Marley, thank you so much for being a part of the Uh-Oh podcast and sharing with our listeners and helping them to be able to figure out some things on their own, to take your experiences and apply it to theirs and to learn and grow from there. So that reminds us that there's one thing that we always leave every one of our listeners with, and that's this simple mantra. You don't have to know everything. You just need to be teachable.
Thanks for listening.